The savings investment identity is one of the most important macroeconomic relationships. To understand that, we will need to know what is a fiscal balance. It's the difference between government's revenue and its expenditure. If revenue is greater than expenditure, then there's a fiscal surplus. If expenditure exceeds revenue, then we have a fiscal deficit. To construct the savings investment identity, let us start off with the simplest possible economy we can think of. Well, pair of economies really. Think of a single person stranded on a deserted island and is fending for himself by fishing for his 3 meals for the day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So this economy has production of 3 units and consumption of 3 units. Since savings is the difference between production and consumption, then there are no savings, and equally, nothing is being put aside for consumption in the future. So there is no investment. Now, if the single person in this economy, the single economic actor, gets up one day and contemplates that he's going to devote a part of his day to producing a net, which will help him to catch more fish in the future, then we have complicated the savings and investment relationship by now introducing saving and investment. If he were to devote a part of his day that he would otherwise spend fishing to producing this net, then production is 3 units, but consumption is only 2. So we have 1 unit of savings, and at the end of it, we have 1 unit of investment, because the net is going to allow consumption in the future. We have an investment good at the end of the day. Now, I said that we have 2 simple economies. Let's have another deserted island right beside this one. And on that deserted island is another person who has been fending for herself by picking 3 mangoes a day. 1 for breakfast, 1 for lunch, 1 for dinner. And when these 2 islanders discover each other and they discuss that, the first guy is planning to miss a meal so he can invest in his net, the person on the second island says, I will save you missing your meal. I will let you have 1 of the mangoes I picked today, so you can have your 3 meals, and you can owe me. You can owe me and pay me back in the future. You can owe me 1 unit of output. So on that day, the relationship between savings and investment in the first economy with the man on the deserted island has production of 3 units, but we now have imports of 1 unit and consumption of 3 units. So production plus imports, which gives us 4, minus consumption, 3, leaves 1 left over for investment. Savings, in this case by foreigners, manifested as imports not paid for by exports, allows investment to take place. Savings is equal to investment, but it's savings by foreigners that affords investment in the local economy. There's no savings in the local economy. Production is 3 units, consumption is 3 units. The equality of savings and investment is because there is foreign savings available by way of imports not paid for with exports. Or to put it another way, it's the excess of imports over exports that represents foreign savings that allows for domestic investment. To illustrate that point, suppose instead of lending a mango to the local economy, it was simply an exchange of one mango for one fish. Suppose this economy had to export one of its fish to pay for the mango. Well, in this case, the only way we can have investment is if the savings are local, is if production is 3 units and consumption is only 2. So we have established a relationship here between production, imports, exports, consumption, and investment. It shows that savings, taking account of foreign savings, has to be equal to investment. Or rather, in order to have investment, we must have some savings, either domestic savings or foreign savings. This is the basis of the savings investment identity. Let us now get rid of the pictures and represent it using symbols. Y, which is production or real income, it's the same thing in terms of quantities. Y production plus M imports minus C consumption minus X exports is equal to investment. If we group these terms, we can see that for there to be investment, there has to be either domestic savings, production greater than consumption, or foreign savings, imports greater than exports. The savings investment identity in an actual economy also has to have government being represented. Governments use up resources. They use up resources that are produced in order to provide the administration of government. So that's going to take up some of the savings. So we add in G for government. And we also therefore have to add in taxation. But taxation doesn't change anything, because taxation is simply a transfer from domestic institutions, individuals and companies, to government. So if we take taxation away from households and businesses, we add it to government. It doesn't change the identity. Expressed in this way, then we have a term that represents the fiscal balance, the difference between tax revenue and government expenditure. And now we see that adding a government entity to our identity, we see that investment is equal to domestic savings, where domestic savings is now out of disposable income, Y minus T, foreign savings, represented by imports being greater than exports, and government savings, an excess of revenue over government expenditure. This relationship is so important as a determinant of and constraint on investment that let's illustrate it with some numbers. Suppose domestic private savings out of disposable income in the economy is $3 billion for the year. That's one component of the pool of savings available for investment. And let us say that the country is running a trade deficit. So it is importing more than it's exporting. Well, let's call it an additional $2 billion of foreign savings. So we're up to 5. But the government is running a deficit. The government is actually spending more on government procurement of goods and services than it is taxing the private economy. That fiscal deficit is 3 billion. So that has to be financed by coming out of the pool of savings. That leaves $2 billion left over as investment in the economy. The savings investment identity tells us that when we sum domestic private savings, foreign savings, and government savings, that must be equal to the amount of investment taking place. And recognizing this identity allows us to see what are the possible ways that we can have more investment. Suppose people in this economy want the rate of investment to increase. Suppose they want an additional $1 billion of investment to take place. Well, there are only 3 ways that it can happen. Either households and businesses have to be persuaded to save more, or foreigners have to agree to lend to this economy by sending over goods that are greater in quantity than the goods that are exported to their economy, or the government must reduce its fiscal deficit. The only way to have more investment is for one of those 3 to take place. So we can take this savings investment identity and transform it arithmetically and get another identity that is useful in macroeconomic analysis. Moving from the savings investment identity to the national income identity. Since we have a minus t and a plus t, then we can cancel those 2 terms. And then we move all the other terms on the left, except for y, to the right-hand side. Or, what is easier visually, is to just move the equal sign to the left. And of course the signs change as it passes all of the other terms. And so we now have output or real income by itself on the left-hand side. And if we rearrange the terms, then we get the national income identity. Output is equal to consumption plus investment plus government procurement plus net exports. The national income identity. This lesson was about deriving the important savings investment identity, which captures the immutable relationship between the level of investment and the amount of savings in an economy